have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. And now I'd like to introduce Carrie Malkovich for Me in a Minute from Woodland Hills.
It's Me in a Minute that Mayor Kafusi likes to do. My name is Carrie Malkovich. I sit on the council for the city of Woodland Hills, and I serve on the league board. I've really enjoyed doing that. We're supposed to just tell a little bit about ourselves. So I have 6 children, 7 grandchildren, and I guess one of the interesting facts is I haven't missed a session since the mid-90s, I think. I'm originally from northern Idaho in Coeur d'Alene. I grew up on 100 acres on the lake there. So land issues are always important to me. I've lived in Utah just over 40 years now and love it here too. Pastimes, I love to cook. That's like one of the only things I like to do. Travel, love to travel. Have some of my travel friends in the audience today. I love to travel all over the place. That is something I want to do. Cool things I did early in my career. My background's in public relations. Early in my career, I did some newspaper work as a reporter, and I got to cover all of the major bands that came to town. And so that was kind of get to be a groupie that gets to interview and get to know them. So anyways, that's just a little bit about me, and I'm glad to see you all here, and I look forward to seeing you at our convention in St. George.
So, and I just want to say, Carrie, before you walk out of the room, or I don't know, maybe you aren't, but Carrie is a fantastic member of the league board. She always is great at conveying the perspective of smaller communities in our state, and really a great addition to that. So thank you for your service. Okay, let's get into the business now. I'm going to have, I guess, Cam, are you going to do a recap? Where's Cam? Well, if we aren't going to do that, then we're going to do the new bill that popped out on the table today, which is Super Dids. Super Dids. So, Justin.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to last LPC of the session. So a couple of bills came out last Friday. We had HB 564, which is the Limited Infrastructure District Amendments Bill, sponsored by Representative Dunnigan. This is the LIDS bill we were expecting to get the whole session. This is the one that we thought we were going to get. This is the one that we did get, but that is not the one we're dealing with now. This one was pulled from the committee agenda, was not heard this morning, is not going to be put on a committee agenda tomorrow. So the LIDS bill is done for the session. Not going to see that one anymore. That's half good news. The second half of the slide, different. SB 295 is Dedicated Infrastructure District Act. DIDS is the acronym again, but yes, this is a different title than we've had in previous iterations of this bill. This bill is different. This is coming from slightly different sources. This is approaching the issue in slightly different ways. And this one passed out of the Senate Economic Development and Workforce Services Committee this morning. So this bill is moving on to the Senate floor. This is the bill we need everyone to reach out on. We're going to send an action alert out on this bill. I've got it up here right now, not editing it right now because I'm talking to you, but it's going to go up pretty quickly here. But let's see if this will pull up. But we need people to, nope, Carson, can you get the roster pulled up? So let's talk about a couple talking points on this one. This one still authorizes the creation of a district and gives an unelected board taxing authority. The way we read the bill, it also gives them eminent domain authority. It's a double whammy. Yep, everywhere your eyes just popped open. Thank you. That's exactly what we want right now. Okay, it gives them sovereign powers and they're unelected. There is a provision for them to eventually become elected, but that's so far down the road we don't really care about it that much. Let's see, other big things. Sorry, let me pull up my notes here. It's still created without any kind of municipal or county approval. If the infrastructure is not turned over to the municipality, now this is an important distinction, with the previous discussions we've had, this infrastructure would be turned over to the municipality. The DIDS bill does not necessarily mean it will be turned over to the municipality. meaning they can charge fees, assessments, and taxes to pay for the operation and maintenance of the infrastructure. It also takes away some of the safeguards that we had worked out in the LIDS bill to make sure that infrastructure would meet what we need under our rules and regulations. So we don't like this bill in any way, shape, or form. I guess I can ask, does anybody like this bill that does not want to fight this? Motion to hate, okay. So yeah, Cam's gonna say something, and then get ready. We want you to pull your phones out right now and start texting legislators, and we're gonna run through some assignments. So Cam, go ahead.
So, fine, I'm having an argument with a proponent about the bill right this second via text as I'm standing here, so I'm gonna put that down.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is SB 295.
Yeah, so a couple things here. As Justin mentioned, we had a work group that was working on lids over the last couple of months. And that work group was an LPC subgroup, met a couple of times. We were working through at the time just a white paper and a concept paper that had, these are the ideas that could be part of legislation. And that's what ultimately ended up in a bill that also was released Friday afternoon, but was not heard in committee today. So they can still suspend the rules and bring that bill forward, but at this point, we think that bill isn't moving. So SB 295 is similar. It's DIDS, but it's not kind of the lid concept that we've brought forward to the LPC previously. So let's, before we jump to this, can we just like walk through the points? Maybe I missed it because I was.
We walked through, yeah.
You did already? Okay,
Yep.
because I was arguing with.
You were arguing the points.
One of the proponents. So before we jump to the Senate roster, do people have questions about what's in this bill or what's not in this bill? Because I think before we jump to this, I just want to make sure we give people a chance to ask questions, to understand what's really in it and what's not in it. So let's go. Hey, Paul's in person. Hi, Paul. You're right in front of the camera, so it's like I'm talking to you via camera.
If the infrastructure doesn't necessarily have to become public in the end, does it have to be built to public standard? And, I mean, ultimately, when it's built and done, does the city have to take ownership of it, or who is going to maintain this infrastructure?
So under the DIDS bill, some of that is unclear, but it allows them to pay for the maintenance and operation themselves. So there's a question mark with that one, but for at least 30 or 40 years, they could potentially just run it themselves.
Hey, Justin,
Yeah, Mark.
clarifying, that also includes them,
Mark Christensen, Saratoga Springs. I believe that bill also allows them to build clubhouses and other amenities with that.
That is correct.
That they would be able to then tax people
to then pay
pay for, say, clubhouse amenities and other things of that nature. So this is especially nefarious because it's not for your traditional utilities. It's for utilities plus amenities.
Okay, yeah, and that's a great clarification. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Mayor Tran, right up here.
I was just wondering, does this have a housing affordability book or component to it?
So the question is, does this have a house affordability component? No.
It doesn't?
It mentions that it could be used for affordable housing, but it does not
But it doesn't
force
require them to.
or require them to do affordable housing. The DIDS bill is interesting in that it has some, what I would call intent language in there, which doesn't ultimately force anything.
Okay, which is what we wanted.
Yes. Yep, back here.
Don Shelton, South Jordan City. I'm curious what the arguments are that the proponents are making for the bill.
You were in committee this morning. I'll let you take
Yeah,
that one.
yeah, I was in committee, I testified against it, and I took notes of their arguments. So let me 10 seconds, just get back to my notes here. So essentially, I'll summarize the presentation from the bill sponsor. Bill sponsor is Senator Dan McKay. His explanation was as follows. Trying to find a financing solution to facilitate affordable housing and housing. This gets to Mark's point a second ago, that yes, there is language in the DID bill in 295 about affordability, but right now it's quite broad on what the DID language, or what the DID financing can be used for. And because local government would no longer have the discretion to approve one of these, local government could not say, we'll Like right now, under the PID statute, local government could say, we'll approve the PID, but these are the outcomes we'd like to see. In this case, this would actually be the first time in the country we've been told that you would have this sort of district that would not have any sort of local government or state government discretionary approval on what those outcomes ought to be. But the first thing that Senator McKay indicated was to find financing solutions that work for affordable housing, allow for creation of DIDs for a landowner building the improvements that a city or a public entity would do, to allow access to the capital bond market to bring down the cost of infrastructure. So that piece sounds similar to LIDs, right? Like that was the whole conversation for months, was how can we, not we as in Justin and me, but how can the proponents create an entity that can access the bond markets, get lower cost financed infrastructure to build the infrastructure that the city requires. Then he said that there would be a cap of 6 mill levies. PID allows up to 15, but again, that's discretionary, so there would be up to 6. The DID has to follow OPMA, they have legal counsel and registered advisor with the SEC, so those are some of the safeguards that they offered. There are a bunch of safeguards that were actually part of the LID bill that are not in the DID bill. Still would have to build city standards, you'd still need land use approval. So this doesn't impact that land use process, but it would be that if they had the approval and had the zoning in place, then the city would have no discretion to say no to the creation of the district that then would operate in the city, and that district would operate to finance the infrastructure to be built and would have access to property tax to pay back whatever bonds that they issue. Let me pause there, because I'm just doing rapid fire through the presentation, but let me stop there, Don, and see if you have a follow-up question before we go to Mayor Walker.
I have a motion to rename it the HOA bill from hell. Because that's what it is. It seems like it's a privately funded HOA that they're gonna have to actually get land use authority on. We have a special service district in Draper, and I'm gonna tell you, it all sounds good when they're proposing it. It doesn't work at all the way that it gets proposed. And it's certainly, this is worse than what we have. My philosophy on it is, I wouldn't support this at all, so. But I do think it's an HOA, and it's a super powerful one.
So I think Mayor Walker just gave a great talking point.
One follow-up question, does the bonding capacity of the DID impact, or bonds issued by the DID impact the bonding capacity of the city?
Todd, do you have an answer on that one? This is a question we've had all year long, and I don't know if we've ever had a great answer.
I'm confusing the two, and I don't remember which. I believe there is language that says it can't affect the bonding capacity of the city, but I'll have to jump in and look at that real quick. I think this one says that.
This one says that, but whether or not
That's true
it happens
is,
in practice, because
yeah.
it's never been done before, right? Like that's one of the questions. Okay, the other things that came up in committee this morning, again, it's not an entitlement tool, it's purely financial. My response back to the committee was it's not purely financial because you have to create a political subdivision in order to get to the financing tool. So it is the creation of a new local government, new political subdivision. And then there was discussion over the role of the landowner, because right now, under the DID language, they would have to pay off the bond at the time of the building. Well, that was the LID piece, right? Pay off the bond
This is
by the
different.
time of the building permit. This is a little bit different. So you could have a scenario where you do have homeowners that are subject to paying off the bond, but they can't access the council, the district council to make decisions on it until you hit a threshold of 75% of the houses have been sold. So, like I said, very complicated.
So Lynn had the mic next.
Yeah, just another question.
Yeah.
A compound question. Does the bill give the municipality authority to inspect the infrastructure to make sure it's built appropriately or adequately? And/or does it give the city the ability to say, we refuse to accept ownership of the infrastructure down the road if that hasn't been done, if it's not built to our standards?
Yeah, so that came up in committee as well. Thank you, Lynn. On the first piece, it would have to be built to our standards, which then leads to that second piece where it's built to maybe it's not built to our standards and the city rejects it. And this is an interesting nuance that I acknowledge we're still trying to get to the exact detail of it, okay? And I think that's an important caveat with everything we're saying right now, is we're doing our best to explain what's in the bill that dropped Friday afternoon. We were analyzing it and the lid bill over the weekend, and then it moved out of committee this morning, okay? So your second question about whether kind of what happens if the local government doesn't, what one of the proponents said was, if there's an improvement the city doesn't want, in that situation, the residents would then have to be elected to govern to manage those improvements. And then you have that other provision that says that those residents can't be on that board until you hit the 75% threshold. So the way I interpret that would be a scenario where Sandy City has the DID, or let me reframe. Property owners inside Sandy City create a DID. They don't build the infrastructure to standards. Sandy City doesn't accept it. So now you have what Mayor Walker was referencing, that the DID would now be responsible for the maintenance and operation and would have to rely on the property tax therein to help pay for it. That's how I think that would work. But again,
But that part's,
trying to piece that
yeah,
together.
that part's a little fuzzy. I think, Mark?
Yeah, so on a couple of those things, first of all, I love that Cam pointed out 75% of the homes will sell before the residents can take over. Basically, the declarant or the property owner controlling the bonding decisions and the taxing decisions. That seems hugely one-sided. The other part, to your question, it is written in the bill that cities cannot, or counties cannot, use the creation of a DID adversely against them. And so, in essence, what they're trying to establish is language that says, you know, we're not clear about the engineering standards, but if they build it, you can't hold the fact that they did a DID, or that they tried to circumvent the government, you know, the local municipality or whoever's in charge. You cannot hold that against them. So he's very much trying to establish, I think, you know, actionable defenses if we don't just take what they're trying to offer us. And so I think that there's some really tricky language in this, and yes, Senator McKay does represent us, so we strongly encourage everyone else to charge the hill on this bill, because ours isn't going to listen to us.
Okay.
Just real quick,
Carson
one of the
had
other
to.
things, and I get the, like Todd, I get the did and the pit and the lids, everything mixed up, but if I remember correctly, that would also allow them to continue to have a bond on public infrastructure if it does get turned over to the city. That's seriously problematic.
Carson, do we have one online?
We have a few comments and questions online. I think one of the common questions I'm seeing is how these interact with cities. Are they overlaid? We're a city, the kind of district we created within an incorporated county that annexed into a city. Like, what's the spatial component of it?
Basically, it could overlay with the city. If 100% of the property owners agree to creation of the district, then regardless of the geography, it can be created. So whether it's outside a city, within an unincorporated county, it doesn't matter. They can create the district.
Great. And there was one question about annexation, whether property owners could annex into the district.
Sorry, yeah, the answer is, sorry, we're looking at the side. Yes, the answer is yes, they could on that one. Are we? All right, any final, so, and I will add, as a talking point on that, there are open questions on some of this. Some of this, when they were drafting it, they just relied on pre-existing code, and that pulled in some things that they may not quite understand what it does when they pulled those code sections in, when they were referencing other code sections. So there are outstanding questions about this bill, which is one other reason that we are not in favor of it going forward right now. This is a highly complex bill to drop this late in the session.
Do you want to go to the roster or just back to the slides?
Just wait for a second. We good? Let's take a vote first.
Yeah, Mayor, in back.
To that point, I mean, a highly complex piece of legislation to drop at this moment. I would love to see the league go on offense and get somebody to sponsor a bill that basically indicates you need to have at least 3 business days or something of that effect when a bill is publicly made available before it goes and is heard at committee. Because to drop something on a Friday afternoon, have it go at 8 AM is insane to me. And how on earth can we really, I mean, in terms of transparency and just accountability and an opportunity for leagues and cities and everybody else to have a conversation here, that to me is highly, highly problematic. Good job on the lids. You know, you were able to, I think, mobilize and get that one pulled, but here, and just like the gentleman that just spoke, I mean, Dan McKay, he's a Riverton resident, right? He's our senator, he's the one that represents us, and so I'm actually texting him during this right now and saying, what's the driving force behind it? I really don't understand it. But anyway, that would be something to look at in next session. We've got time.
Great.
So let me summarize where I think we're at here on Monday at 12:30 with four and a half business days to go here. This bill has to pass out of the Senate unless they suspend the rules by tomorrow night. If it doesn't pass out of the Senate, then they would need to suspend the rules in order to consider a Senate bill on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. If it passes out of the Senate, it's supposed to get a House committee hearing. They will likely suspend the rules at some point to say bills, as long as they had one committee hearing, don't need a second. But if they stick with the rule of needing two committee hearings, that would mean it needs to pass the Senate today in order to be agendaed for a committee tomorrow. So Mayor Staggs, if you were frustrated before, the timeline I just gave you should make you even more frustrated, right? That being said, there's been a lot of discussion around lids, PIDs, DIDs. Norm, to your point, like a lot of moving pieces. We had our work group, and we've really been waiting all session for a bill. Now we have two bills. This is the bill that came out of committee. And so we were trying to engage on the lids concept earlier in the session because we knew it was going to be complicated. We're trying to figure out if there was a path forward. What we don't have a good answer for right now is if ultimately we're going to be told from the powers that be, you need to negotiate on this bill, or if we just said no and other entities said no, that the bill just dies. So what we want from this group is your marching orders based on the DID bill that we've explained it to you. Is are we opposed and we're just opposed, period, end of story for the final week of the session, or are we opposed but willing to consider potential amendments or any potential changes to the bill in light of some of the questions, not just that have come up here, but it came up in our lid work group over the last few weeks. So that's really what we're looking for here, so we can relay that back. What?
I was just looking at Gary. Gary said motion to hate earlier,
Yeah.
so.
There was a
But I
motion.
think we have one hand up and then, yeah.
I would support hate and study as well, but the question I have is, it sounds like we already have a lid bill that we're generally in favor of. Why?
No, not generally in favor of.
Okay, somewhat better than this, I assume.
Better than, but still with some fatal concerns.
Okay, but is it possible to say, look, we're just dead set opposed to this DID concept, we'll work with you on the lid bill, but we're not gonna work with this?
So I think with the lids bill, we've been working on that one throughout the whole interim, and it still has a sovereign powers piece, which is just a pill we haven't been able to swallow. So I don't think at this point, and someone can disagree with me here, but at this point, I don't think for the next 4.5 days, we want to entertain the idea of bringing the lids bill back to work on.
Sort of an opinion on the legality of officials with access authority and eminent domain, have we formed any type of opinion?
So thank you, Mayor, for those online. Mayor Workers from Conrad Heights asked about a legal opinion of non-elected officials with the property tax authority or other types of sovereign power. Gary, you had your hand up. Did you want to answer? Oh, just trying to fix the mic. Okay, got it. Yeah, Mayor, I'm glad you asked this question, right? Because what we were told throughout that lid process, and we presented this to the LPC a few weeks ago, was that in order to access the public bond market, a governmental entity has to have sovereign power. And the sovereign power has to be property tax authority or police power or condemnation authority outside of the district boundaries. So when Justin said we've never been able to get to yes on the sovereign power, it's because we've always raised that concern of an unelected group having those sovereign powers to, for whatever reason, whether it's accessing the bond market or something else. Is it legal? Is it constitutional? I think those questions would be up in the air. If the legislature could say the legislature could authorize it, then the Treasury Department would have to determine whether there's truly enough sovereign power to access the bond market, and then you still have the constitutional questions around municipal functions. One thing that I personally find rather interesting up here is there's been a lot of discussion this session around property tax and whether there should be caps on property tax and whether districts who have elected officials on the board but aren't directly elected to that district, whether they should have additional limits on their ability to do property tax. So there's been a lot of discussion about property tax, and yet in this case, it's let's create an entity that can use property tax, albeit in a limited purpose, but can use this property tax, and there are no elected officials as part of it.
Okay, Gary.
So I think it's important to remember that this was supported by House leadership, and part of the reason that nothing has come out of the House is because they could not find, using some of the best minds around, a way around the sovereign powers issue. And so I would just say this, that because of the late date of the session, I'd make a motion that we oppose vehemently, and that we do not negotiate.
Okay, second from Seth. Mayor, you should actually call for this, not me. Okay, all in favor, says Mayor.
Discussion.
Oh, discussion.
Any more discussion?
Okay.
Councilmember? No? Okay.
Nope. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So, yeah, we're tracking the online vote too.
What's that?
Seth behind you.
Yeah, Seth, go ahead.
Sorry, one other quick clarification. Thank you for that motion. On the eminent domain piece, we're gonna be following up with a couple of our attorneys on that piece, just to make sure everybody's clear on what the talking points are around the eminent domain. So just stay tuned. We'll have talking points updated later today to address the property tax piece, but those other sovereign powers.
And one just quick additional comment, this is Seth of Spanish Fork City. One addition to the thoughts or comments in Gary's motion of oppose is we've talked a lot about this issue in other bills and bills we're going to be talking about today. And this is too much, too late, especially given all that we have done and lifted on these other bills that we'll be specifically talking about in just a moment. It's too little, too late, too much, too late, on which one, all of that.
Yeah, Mayor Ramsey, go ahead.
Also, historically, I don't think this vote should come as a surprise. We, through me at the UEOC, already didn't support this clear back at the UEOC meetings that we had. In fact, we asked for this vote to be pulled out separate so that we could be clear that we weren't digging it. So, and I can't remember at the time if it was called lids or anyway.
It was lids at the
The
time.
entire concept. We've always held this ground.
All right, so.
And one other reason is just because there's in the proposed bill, there's an incorporation of law from special districts that we haven't had a chance to wade through, that could have all kinds of ramifications. One of those ramifications was that it includes the eminent domain power, but there are all kinds of things that it's just hard to deal with when you get a bill on Friday and have to have an 8 o'clock committee meeting, as Mayor Stokes mentioned.
Okay, with that, I'm going to run through this really quickly. So we need every senator to hear about this, and if you haven't texted them yet, I'm going to ask for hands really quick. Who's going to reach out to Scott Sandel? Okay, thank you. Who's going to reach out to Chris Wilson? Anybody? Cash or Rich? Somebody online? Okay, Senator John Johnson. Anybody going to reach out there? Okay, we got one. Thank you. Senator Buxton, David Buxton. Okay, got a few there. Thank you. Senator Ann Milner, Davis Morgan Weber. Beautiful. Senator Jerry Stevenson. Okay, got some. Leighton and Kaysville. President Adams. Lots of hands went up. Beautiful. Love it. Senator Weiler. South Davis got him, great. Senator Jen Plum. So Alexander, beautiful. Senator Luz Escamilla. Okay. Senator Daniel Thatcher. Done and done, great. Senator Karen Kwan. Got there, beautiful. Senator Nate Bluen. Several hands, love it. Senator Stephanie Pitcher. You guys are doing a ton, thank you. Appreciate it. Senator Kathleen Reeby. All right, lots of hands on that one, great. Sorry, Senator Reeby. Senator Harper. Okay, several, great. Senator Lincoln Fillmore. Okay. Senator Dan McKay. We've already heard there. Senator Kirk Colmore. Okay. Senator Ron Winterton. Thank you. Senator Michael Kennedy. Anybody for? Okay. And a few people online, great. Senator Andrag. Okay, got it. Let's see, Senator Grover. Grover in the back, thank you. Senator Curtis Bramble. Okay, great. Senator Mike McKell. You got McKell? I was like, I know someone's got it. You're right back there. All right, Senator Hinkins, David Hinkins. Thank you. Senator Darren Owens. All right, beautiful, thank you. Senator Evan Vickers, in Southern Utah Cedar, online. And then Senator Don Ibsen. Anyone from Washington wants to grab that one? Got it? Okay, beautiful. Please reach out on this one. We're sending the action alert out, but we want them, we've taken the position. Let's make sure they feel the pressure on this one. Thank you all. Yeah, Senator Winder. Senator Winder, Representative Winder. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Is this one, I feel like it's great we're gonna reach out, but should we be reaching out to our constituents, our communities, and saying, call your senators?
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to reach out to your constituents, say this is what this
Mobilize our
does.
constituents.
And again, there are multiple talking points, but if I'm picking a talking point, the easiest one is unelected board that has taxing authority. The rest are really good talking points, but that's a good headline. And eminent domain.
Justin?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Hinkins, Milner, Darren Owens, and Jerry Stevenson were the yay votes in committee on it today. So that if you're reaching out to Hinkins, Milner, Owens, or Stevenson, you're going to have to flip them before they were in committee day.
I will add, they were yeses, they were hesitant yeses, though.
So push hard on them.
So push them, yeah. There's room to push
And
them.
Karen Kwan was the one nay vote this morning, so.
So tell her thank you as well. One more from Paul, and then let's move on to not easier topics. So that is SB 295. And the fact that we have an SB that is that high makes me a little bit sick.
Do we know how soon this will hit the Senate floor?
It could be up this afternoon.
Okay, and do we know the position of the governor on this? Should we push him for a veto?
TBD. It's nuanced, and we're talking to the governor's office about it. Okay. What should I hit, Carson, so I don't mess up the slides? Yep. Super loads.
All right, excellent. So today we are going to take a position on HB 499. We had a meeting last week with stakeholders, including UAC and Wayne Niederhauser. That was pretty productive, discussing the bill. We also had a meeting with folks from second-class counties prior to this meeting, discussing some of the winter sheltering provisions and a potential alternative. As we go through this, I just want to put it forward that there still are some technical changes that need to occur with the bill. So regardless of what the ultimate position we take is, please be mindful that there are, it's anything as drafted still will require some updates just to make sure the language is coherent and does what the intent is. So we presented on this briefly last week. As I mentioned, we've also had a lot of other meetings around it. HB 499 seeks to be a midterm policy over the next 3 years to address kind of winter shelter and update the mitigation fund to help cover the deficit that currently exists in the shelter cities. There's 3 key components of it: the mitigation fund, this winter sheltering plan that builds off of 440 last year, and Code Blue. Oh, and I apologize, I did not update this slide. So we need to take a position on this today. So the staff recommendation is not position pending. We will figure out what that is based on this presentation and what you all think. So I'm taking this a little out of order because I want to make sure we end with kind of the more nuanced piece last. So Code Blue, as the bill states, begins at when the temperature is 15 degrees or below, including wind chill. And this is to create more of a crisis response statewide, well, statewide as in counties of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th class. For what it means for all local governments is that you cannot abate a camp unless the camp itself poses a greater health and safety risk than the weather. You can't confiscate personal property that would be used for survival in the winter. It allows churches and nonprofits to allow folks to come sleep overnight. And it has some street outreach for homeless populations to let them know where services are. When I talk about some of these technical changes, it's a lot in here to figure out what exactly does that mean as we figure that out so we have clear parameters for what the expectations are. If you are a shelter city or have a shelter, some provisions that apply to you is it increases the capacity by 35%. It requires an expedited intake, and it dictates that you must provide shelter to folks up to that increased capacity, or unless the individual poses a threat to the staff or other clients at the shelter. Are there questions on Code Blue? This is the more technical section that we are still actively working through with some of the shelter cities, with the fire chiefs, to make sure that this language is workable. Okay. The other provision that, the second provision is the mitigation fund. It changes the mitigation fund contribution to unlock an additional $2.5 million of local contributions. There's a $2.5 million state contribution. And to get there, it increases the population contribution to 2.55% of your population distribution of your sales tax with a $275,000 contribution cap. Ultimately, this gets an additional $5 million into the fund and helps shelter cities address their deficit. Right now, shelter cities are running about a $21 million deficit. So this certainly does not erase it, but it helps cover it. We also had some questions about how is this money distributed and what accountability is there. So last year, HB 440 determined that this funding would be distributed based on a formula that looked at kind of the relative impact that the cities were having on homelessness and kind of the impact homelessness was having on the cities. So the formula drives the distribution, but cities are required to report back to the Utah Homelessness Council with key metrics for reimbursement. So everything they're getting is reimbursing an expenditure that they already made. The third component is where we've had the most nuance and conversation within the bill, and this is kind of this winter response planning. Right now, counties of the first class, so Salt Lake County, is required to create a winter response plan. The bill proposes that second class counties come online beginning in winter 24-25 and for 25-26 to ensure that there are sufficient beds available within those counties. In our conversations, there's been some concern about the mandate and fears about a prescriptive response. We had a pretty robust conversation about that both last week and this morning, so I would, given where we are with time, unless there are specific questions, we probably won't dig too much into that. What I do want to share with you is that we did poll the folks who were in the room about their comfort with that second class county provision. And as you can see the results here, about 53% were comfortable, 15% were uncertain, and about a third of folks were concerned with the proposal, falling between the somewhat and varies within both of those emotions. Additionally, something that was brought up and that was more popular with the groups was a substitute that Brady Brammer is proposing, which would essentially, the language as he drafted it says that Counties that are not counties of the first class, so essentially second-class counties, shall provide the overflow plan to the offices, Office of Homeless Services in this instance, demonstrating the objectives of the county's overflow plan and how the overflow plan will meet the stated objectives. And to provide some context, it polled 63% were comfortable, 37% were concerned. We did have a drafting kind of staff error with this. Uncertain was not an option, so unfortunately we don't have a great apples to apples comparison of how that fell, and I apologize. We were rushing trying to get this up, and that was an oversight. So just so you're aware, that's kind of where the feedback from those who were present at that meeting fell. Are there any questions on either of those two provisions? I don't want to have the same meeting over again, but if there are outstanding questions, I do want to make sure we address them.
Just quickly, is there anything in the bill that affects third class and lower counties and third or fourth class and lower cities?
Great question. So the bill as drafted, the mitigation fund applies to everybody. So everybody either pays into the mitigation fund or is a qualifying shelter city and receives mitigation funding. So that provision applies to every single one of you. Code Blue applies to counties in the first through fourth class and all of these cities therein as it is currently drafted. And the winter response plan applies to counties of the first and second class and every city and town therein. So there's a little bit of something for everyone in here. Oh, we have another from...
From Salt Lake City. First or second slide talked about the Code Blue and the ability for a city to do no camping enforcement or health and security sort of enforcement issues. Is there anything in the bill that clarifies who makes the call about what overrides the other one?
No, and that's, again, like this technical language that we just need to keep working on. We also received a request from another shelter city essentially saying, you know, if we want to have we want to have the capacity to do more than what Code Blue calls for, and so we're trying to make sure that we do figure out all those technical pieces within Code Blue because they do have pretty broad ramifications for a lot of cities and towns. We want to make sure that, again, those like expectations and how that is executed is clearly understood by everyone, because right now the language is a little soft. Okay. So, with that said, we are open to LPC making a position on this bill.
Kate Bradshaw, Bountiful. I'd like to make a motion that we support HB 499 as currently drafted. I've spent a lot of the summer working in this space, and I think that this bill came out much better than we anticipated. I think the ability now it's back? Okay. Ability for cities to partner with counties, I'm not sure which angle you have to hold the magic mic at to make it work, is something that we should embrace and be prepared to support. We have an opportunity to make sure that we can solve this in a way that may be slightly different in each of our areas. Maybe it'll be through hotel vouchers in one county, and maybe it'll be through a facility, a central facility in a different county, but we have the ability to solve this problem, and I think we are globally under attack that perhaps cities aren't prepared to do hard things, and this is an opportunity to make sure that we are in the driver's seat of doing that. So that is why I make the motion to support as drafted.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I'll just remind anybody, if you're an LPC member and you haven't signed in yet, please sign in, and this should be voting by LPC members only. So is there a discussion to the motion? Yes.
Haley Whitlock, West Jordan City Council. I just have concerns with the wording of the motion because I'm hearing from Molly that we need to work on some technical language. And then I'm hearing the motion say, as originally drafted. So that concerns me. I'm wondering if the maker of the motion would be amenable to having it include in the motion that we support and that we want to continue to work on technical changes.
So is the maker of the motion willing to accept the amendment?
I'm willing to accept that amendment related, to the code blue technical provisions. I think the provisions related to counties of the second class is something that I feel is important to keep as drafted.
Okay, and the second's okay with it as well? Okay. Any other discussion?
Got some back here.
Okay. Isaac?
Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Brammer language only impacts the second class county representatives, and where we had a vote earlier this morning with 63% of those people who would be impacted by this one change saying they support that. I think it would be a better move for the league to support the Brammer position. It still requires the task force, it still requires you to address the exact same issue. It simply removes a mandate that you address getting every person who needs a bed in those situations a bed, the government ensuring that. And the Utah County COG voted to request that, and so that would be my personal feeling.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to support 499 as drafted, subject to technical amendments regarding the Code Blue.
We have a substitute motion online to support the bill with the Brammer link. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have a substitute motion online to support the bill with the Brammer motion. The Brammer motion. Sorry.
Okay. Is there a second for the substitute motion?
Will you restate it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, the mic was having trouble. There's a motion online to support, or substitute motion online to support the bill with the Brammer amendment.
And the maker of the motion.
And the maker of the motion was Mayor Fulmer, and it looks like a second from Kurt Osler.
Okay. So discussion to the substitute motion. So let me ask the maker of the motion. I presume, Mayor Fulmer, that your motion would include allowing us to pursue the technical amendments relating to Code Blue as well? Yeah, she says that, and is that okay with the second online? Mr. Osler? Yep, okay. So we have so the substitute motion is to favorably support 499 with the Brammer provision and technical amendments to the Code Blue provisions. Discussion to the substitute motion. Go ahead.
One question and then back to Kate.
I'm sorry?
Do you want to take this question and then back to?
Sure. I didn't see the question.
Molly, I don't know if you're able to answer this. So in Salt Lake County, if we fail to come up with a plan and the state steps in and does the overplan for us, how does this affect this in second-class counties if we accept this change?
Great question. So right now, 499 as drafted would impact counties of the second class the same way. It is my understanding of the Brammer language that the Brammer language really speaks, it's quite precise and focused on the overflow plan and demonstrating how those objectives will be met. In my understanding, it does not speak to what happens if that does not occur. And so I do not have a clear answer for you. It was my understanding of the intent that it just changed that provision. So I don't candidly have a solid answer for you.
Okay, then let's go to Kate Bradshaw.
So as the maker of the underlying motion, again, I feel very strongly we have an interesting opportunity in the second in the second-class counties, to shape something that is unique to each of our counties, the 4 of us that are second-class counties, and to be part of the solution. This is a gift that was, quite frankly, not given to our sister cities in Salt Lake County. And I do think we maybe have a little bit of a divide between 2 of our second-class counties, where we had indications that our Davis County commissioners were in supportive of the underlying original bill. We are all in this business to do the hard things for our community and to solve problems and to have a seat at the table to solve those problems. And I think we would be absolutely remiss to not take the opportunities given to us in HB 499 as currently drafted.
Thank you. Pardon?
So you're opposed to the substitute motion, yes?
Yeah, so you're speaking in opposition to the substitute motion, okay? Okay. All right, any other discussion to the substitute motion? Anything online? Okay, seeing none then, we'll call the substitute motion for a vote. And I think we'll have to raise hands here. We need the 60% majority on this. So voting members of the LPC in favor of the substitute motion.
That's
What?
right. Can I just say?
Yeah.
Okay, so first, for people who are in the room, if you haven't signed in, we'll give you 1 second to quickly sign in so we know what the number is here. It's not a majority, it's 60% is our consensus number per our bylaws. So if you have not signed in, you need to sign in so we know what that threshold is. Online, Carson is gathering that number. So last chance for people in the room to sign in, and online, make sure you've noted if you're a voting member per the roster, so we know what the overall threshold number is. Norm?
Considering the substitute motion or the original? Substitute motion.
Here, yeah.
So the motion on the floor right now is the substitute motion. We'll wait just a minute for people to come back.
Well, we're gonna have to have 2 counts, we're gonna have to have count here.
52 online.
How many?
And
How
Lee?
many here?
Yeah, I'll grab it. Lee and Norman. They're counting. Yeah.
Two online, and let's wait for a number.
Okay, Carson, do you have a number for online? 52? Carson, is that accurate? Okay, 52 voting members online.
And Liam's counting them.
Okay, we're almost done counting for in-person. Yeah, you can just ask for the vote and then we'll
Yeah,
do the
okay.
math.
All
Let's
right.
do that.
Okay, then all those in favor of the substitute motion, please raise your hand and keep them raised.
In the room.
In the room, yeah.
Yeah,
Support of the substitute motion.
Mike, yeah.
In support of the substitute motion.
So,
This the one that takes the teeth out of it, or?
This is the one that's on.
Don't lobby me, I
I'm just clearing the garbage.
Eight, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 12, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I got it already.
Okay, you got everybody? Everybody against the substitute motion, please raise your hand. Oh, wait.
We need to,
Okay.
I need to get the
Oh.
online number first, so
All
it
right.
doesn't.
All right.
What's the number up there? 52 plus 1.
So, do you want me to say it?
Let's figure
So it's 52 online.
plus
63 in the room.
15, 60%, 69.
Oh, no. What?
How many do we have in the room?
We had 63 in the room.
So it's 55 plus 63. So 58.
So
What's 55 plus 63?
115.
Or it's 55 plus 63.
Oh, no, I had 52 on mine.
Yeah, it's
It's
55.
55
Yeah,
now?
55.
Okay.
So 55 plus 63.
Is 118.
118. So 60% of 118 equals
70.8, so 71.
71 votes. I don't.
71 votes. So for the grammar motion, it is at 50 votes.
Okay.
So now let's do the no votes.
Okay, so now those in the room who are voting against the substitute motion, please raise your hand.
One, 3, 4, 5. Keep them up, keep them up.
They did beat 63.
17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. Did I think 38, 39, 40, 40? Did I get them?
The substitute motion now it's 60.
So, the yes votes in the room and in person, there were 50 yes votes, and then the no votes were at 62. So the motion fell 50 to 62.
Okay, so the,
I wasn't counting.
That's fine. Yep.
so
Yep,
you,
that's right.
counting all the votes online and in the room, the motion fails 50 to 62. So now we'll go to the underlying motion, which is to support 499 with the original language with tweaks or revisions to the code blue language. All right, all those in favor of the original motion, raise your hand, please.
How many in a room?
There were 50 in the room.
Who voted yes?
Voted aye. And then how many online voted aye? So So opposed, vote on the opposed. If you're opposed to this underlying.
Okay, yeah, so those who are opposed to the original motion, please raise your hand.
Opposed, one. Any opposed in the room to the underlying motion? Okay, and then how many online, Carson, are opposed? Opposed to the underlying. So what we had 75 aye votes, 19 no votes.
Okay, so 17 aye votes, 19.
No, 75 aye votes.
75 aye votes, 19 no votes. The motion carries by the required 60%.
Some of you didn't vote.
Some of them weren't supposed to.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Talk about housing next.
No, yeah, sure. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback and direction. We'll follow with both Representative Elison and with Wayne Niederhauser on that. Okay, transportation, this hasn't really changed other than, and then on the appropriations piece, you'll likely have noticed that the Executive Appropriations Committee met Friday afternoon and released their initial list. That list won't be final until midnight Friday night. On that list, you see we've highlighted what ultimately came out of that initial list. So from the different items that we've talked about as a group, you can see what's been highlighted. You can see up in the housing and homelessness side, a good chunk of those dollars were ultimately funded. Homelessness mitigation was funded, and then the rest was there. We've highlighted public safety retirement because that was not funded in the EAC list. So stay tuned to see if that means that the bill ultimately dies. I want to applaud Molly and the research team because all session long they have been outlining the fiscal impact of House Bill 104. As you recall, we had a motion that we supported. We supported the return to work piece, but we were opposed to the Tier 2 plus piece. And we've shared all the data about the financial impact of Tier 2 plus, which again did not show up in the EAC funding on Monday.
On the local administrative advisor.
Yeah.
It's 15 on the list, local administrative
Yep,
advisor.
it was not on the.
Do you feel like that's going to?
It was not on the initial list.
Okay.
Yep, it was not on the initial list. So we reached out to the governor over the weekend because it was a gubernatorial priority, and the governor was reaching out to executive probes, and then we reached out as well.
Do we need to reach out as a group?
These decisions were basically made over the weekend, so I think stay tuned because nothing is final until midnight on Friday night. So we have not heard an update from the governor's outreach on that bill yet. Okay. So I wanted to give Scott Darrington and Pleasant Grove a quick shout out here. Hopefully this doesn't turn into legislation this week, but last week, the long-awaited decision on the transportation utility fee came down from the Utah Supreme Court, and local governments won. So normally Scott is sitting right there, but Isaac and Mike are, and I don't see Pleasant Grove in the room, either the mayor or Scott. But I know several cities contributed financially to help this, help this litigation go all the way to the Supreme Court. The decision is great for local governments in that it affirmed our broad authority to do these types of fees. The court did not rule on whether or not the methodology was reasonable. So that's been remanded back to district court. I'll spare you all the details from there, but just know that this was really good news for local government, and we anticipate that whenever there's litigation around finances, it often turns into legislation. Part of our argument the last 2 years as we've been waiting, as we've pushed off several bills that would have made it illegal for cities to do a transportation utility fee because we kept saying, wait on the court, wait on the court. So now we have the Supreme's decision. It's been remanded to district court for reasonableness. Stay tuned. Hopefully there won't be a bill in the next few days on this, but expect it'll likely be an interim conversation. Speaking of transportation money, there were a bunch of emails that went around this weekend on transportation. I'm going to do my very darndest in 1 minute to simplify what's left out there unresolved in the local transportation space. 2 bills right now, House Bill 500, SB 260. I've highlighted the fact that now both of these bills include a city piece of the fifth. In the case of House Bill 500, the current language has 0.05 going to the county, and then up to 40% being used for mental or behavioral health. Counties of the first class, so Salt Lake County. Then 0.10 to transit, and you can see the other breakdowns. Currently in SB 260, 0.05 to cities has been put in through the sub. Last week it wasn't there, this week it is. And then 0.05 to the county, but 100% can go to mental or behavioral health. And then the 0.10 goes to the county, the first class highway fund with flexibility for transit. So a couple of quick notes here. What? Yeah, for now, only for transit for now. Couple of quick notes. Number one, Summit County is the only entity that has imposed the fifth. The fifth right now does not require voter approval, and the fifth has only been voted on in 1 county. It was authorized 5 years ago. It expires this June. So unless the legislature modifies the sunset, which they're doing in SB 185, it was going to expire this year. So there hasn't been a vote in any city, there hasn't been a vote in any county about the fifth outside of Summit County Council imposing it, okay? So where the kind of the biggest political push point or pressure points are right now is around the 0.05 and the flexibility for the counties to use that, and the 0.10 of whether that goes directly to transit in Salt Lake County, whether it goes to the county, the first class highway fund, or it goes somewhere else. So we are going to ask a Slido question that first is focused on cities in the second class. So this question is just for those of you in cities in the second class. This will save us time. So this is just for cities in Davis, Weber, Washington, and Utah. And it deals with this 0.05 on your thoughts on whether that county component, especially in light of House Bill 499, ought to have some flexibility to spend just the county piece on transportation and behavioral and mental health. Okay, so it's not instead of transportation, just be that flexibility. So again, this is not for the Salt Lake County folks, this is just for cities in Davis, Weber, Washington, and Utah. Okay, so I'll give you guys a second. Ditto online, make sure you do it, because we told the counties we would get back to them to get a sense of where the cities were on this piece. Okay, we had enough responses there. Now this is for cities in Salt Lake County. Same question, but this just saves us some analysis on the back end about having the flexibility to spend all of the 0.05 on transportation, behavior, mental health. As you saw in the 2 bills, right now one bill is saying all of it could be used that way. Another bill says 40% could be used, and we just want to get a sense. For just the county 0.05. So the city 0.05 would be transportation money. The county 0.05 would be transportation and behavioral and mental health. And the reason this matters particularly in Salt Lake County is the only way cities get this money is if the county imposes it. And Salt Lake County has indicated to us that they want the flexibility to spend the money on mental and behavioral health. Again, it's not an instead of, it's in addition to. And so they're trying to figure out if they can get that flexibility which would then make it easier for them to impose the tax, and then therefore Taylorsville and West Jordan would get the city money that we would be entitled to, so long as you're compliant with moderate income housing plans, okay? So, perfect, I'm closing this one too, but this will be helpful information that we'll be able to relay back. There's a new,
So I was just gonna say that in conversations with Mayor Wilson with respect to this, her goal is to try to use some of this money to implement facets of the Miami model of addressing unsheltered folks that a number of officials went down to take a look at, and this is a funding source to be able to do that. That's why she's said, I don't know that we need this in Salt Lake County for transportation as much as we need it to implement this Miami model.
perfect, okay. Now, I get questions all the time, how do you guys use your Slido results? Because we don't share them publicly, but I thought these two would be helpful for you to know how we use them just from last week. So only 23% of you were in combined support for SB 99, or excuse me, 199, this was the referendum bill. So the plurality of the responses was to go neutral. So we shared those with the officers later that day, and the officers said, yep, let's just be neutral on this bill. Likewise, on the veto request, as of last week, that's where that was the LPC survey results. We're following up with those who said they were unsure before we make that final decision. But just so you know, like your Slido results have been really helpful to us. Okay, any final questions on transportation funding before I jump to the housing bills? Because we're ready for a vote on those as well. Okay. House Bill 364, there hasn't really been major changes on House Bill 364 other than technical pieces. So this language really is clarifications about moderate income housing plans and was the vehicle to get a lot of state money that I referenced earlier to help on housing, particularly for low income housing. With SB 174, I'm going to take a second just to make sure we're all clear on what 174 does and doesn't do, because the substitute came out at the end of the week last week, and the substitute looks different than what it did before because we've been negotiating it all session and really for the last few months. So within our Land Use 101, we've got our legislative actions of general plans, legislative actions of zoning. Then when you get into subdivisions, you have your administrative action, that's a preliminary subdivision, and then the administrative action of the final subdivision, okay? So, quick timeline, kind of going back to the fall, the discussion around administrative land use on subdivisions really started in earnest in September after the summer of, frankly, getting beat up on some of those other ideas out there like ending zoning. In fact, there were a couple of us who met with some legislators in the middle of the summer. They said, basically, we think where we should start is just to preempt zoning and end zoning altogether. So that was the summer. Then after a lot of back and forth through the summer, in September at the American Planning Association convention, there was a lot of this discussion. At our policy committee, this committee in September, we brought some concepts to you for consideration. Then at the annual convention, our annual convention, we used all of the caucuses, the city attorneys and the city managers meetings to get feedback on those concepts. The board in October gave us direction to discuss changes to administrative land use processes, which then we actually brought back to the policy committee in October to say, what do you think of this subdivision proposal? Then it was presented at the November Commission on Housing Affordability, and then through the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission in January, and then it didn't actually get drafted until January, which is in part why it's taken all session to get to a substitute to present to you, okay? But in terms of the concepts, a lot of the concepts we've been discussing in some form or fashion for the last few months. So again, what does it do right now and what does it not do? Within the land space, SB 174 has no change to the public process, okay? Within the legislative zoning column, no change to the public process. Now you can see below, we've made a list of the items that we have fought off that would have preempted us in these different spaces. So kind of with the left hand, we were punching back on some of those concepts. The right hand, we were trying, based on the feedback we were getting from the board and the membership, to figure out, can we improve the administrative land use process? But you can see SB 174 doesn't change the public process in the legislative context, which was a line in the sand for us, and you can see all the different things that we fought off there. So now, there are lots of administrative actions that cities do in land use. This bill only focuses on the legislative process around subdivisions, okay? So within that administrative preliminary subdivision, the bill affirmatively states that we may hold a public hearing. Now, by quick show of hands, how many of your cities do not hold any public hearings for subdivisions currently? So raise your hand if you don't, okay? So you can see there are a handful of cities that right now actually don't hold any hearings, any administrative hearings around subdivisions. But based on the feedback we got from the members, we felt it was important to still preserve the ability to have that public hearing if desired at the front end of that subdivisions process. Likewise, as part of the back and forth, we advocated to ensure that the private sector, when they were bringing subdivision applications, particularly on the improvement plans and the engineering plans, that the quality of their submissions needed to be better. And they should not be relying on our engineers to do the work for them. We also fought off the 25-foot road width standard that had been proposed. We fought off financial penalties on shot clocks and a deemed approved standard. All of those things do not appear in SB 174. That's the preliminary subdivision piece. Then when you get to the final subdivision piece, SB 174, this is really the crux of it, is you do not have the city council weighing in on that final approval. Because ultimately that final approval should be based on the standard. Do you meet the standard, yes or no? And it doesn't go to that public hearing. So again, kind of trying to define what 174 does and doesn't do. Within the general plan phase, there are all these places where we support public input and public comment, and SB 174 does not change that public process. Likewise, in our legislative action on zoning, there are multiple ways where the community engages with the city. And we have fought to make sure SB 174 does not change that public process. Where SB 174 does come in is the administrative subdivision process. And there's still, the application still has to be consistent with the general plan and zoning map. So if an applicant comes to the city and it requires a zone change, it requires that legislative action, then you're still earlier in that process where the legislative zoning takes place and there's public engagement, and there's, SB 174 does not change that. Instead, what SB 174 focuses on, again, based on all the feedback and the deliberation over the last few months, has been, once it gets to that subdivision phase, this is what the process looks like to provide the certainty for both the local government side and the property owner of how subdivisions get approved. I'm going to pause there. Todd, is there anything? No? Gary, I'm looking over at you, just as legal counsel, making sure that I've stated everything accurately. You're shaking your head no, that's comfortable. Are there questions either in the room or online about what SB 174 does, or I think almost as importantly, what it doesn't do? Ryan? No? Dwayne? And then Paul? What?
Just quickly, Cameron, what's the effective date?
Paul, excellent question on the effective date. That was another thing that we were negotiating, was to make sure there was a long enough runway for local governments to comply. So right now what's in the bill is that all the cities that have to do moderate income housing plans have to update your subdivision ordinances by February 1st of next year. Okay, so assuming the bill passes this week, that gives almost an 11-month runway for cities to update those ordinances. And then for those who are not moderate income housing plans, so smaller than 5,000, they would have until the following January. So they would have, now you're asking me to do math on the fly, but they'd have a much longer time in order to update those subdivisions. And that was also based on the Slido results from 2 weeks ago about how long it would realistically take for cities to comply.
Did you say January 1st?
January 1st of 2025 for non-MIHP communities.
Cameron,
Dwayne.
is there anything specifically that carves out PUDs or subdivision processes that have a legislative nature to them?
Yes, and I'll let Todd answer.
Yeah, we put a specific provision in that says your legislative type processes that might go with the subdivision are not bound by the restrictions here. So, practice pointer, you're gonna wanna put those first, right? You're gonna need to move those first in your ordinance amendments, I think. I think that's the safest way to do it.
Other questions about what is in and what is not in SB 174.
No questions, Cam. I just want to make a motion. When we started working on this bill a year ago, I did not think we would be where we are today. And when I say that, I'm saying it in a very positive manner. I think we all owe Mayor Ramsey, who represented us on the UEOC, and the league staff a huge thank you and round of applause for their work on this bill. I anticipated when it came out, it would have a lot of harsh penalties, a lot of fines. It doesn't have that. There are things that are hard for us to live with, but I think Senator Fillmore has done a fantastic job of negotiating with the league in good faith, and I think it's our turn to step up and do our part. So with that, I move that the league support Senate Bill 174 moving forward.
You got a hand behind you.
Thanks. First, I'll second the motion, but on behalf of the league, I'm amazed at what you've been able to accomplish as a staff. I have that weird opportunity to sit on both sides of the fence on this issue, chairing the Legislative Affairs Committee for the Realtors as well. I never thought we would get to this point this well. There are things that we don't like. There's a whole lot of things that Realtors don't like either. And the home builders hate the whole thing. So, so I call that a massive win on our part. We did really well, and for that I second that.
Okay, before we get to discussion of the motion, I'll take Chair's prerogative on this. This has been a completely hard-fought battle. You know, we went to bat for you to get away from the 25-foot road width and all these other punitive measures that the Property Rights Coalition has been hammering at us with basically all year. And I want to also thank Mayor Ramsey. She was the only no vote on the UEOC and fought for us with respect to a lot of these things, so we didn't get rolled on making general plans mandatory or just eliminating zoning on the Florida model. So a lot of work has been done on this, and yes, there are compromises, and yes, you know, there always are, I guess, but this is a pretty good deal. Does anybody else have any other further discussion? Then all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, rule that's unanimous. Thank you.
Check online.
Oh, online?
I don't know where my online guy went.
Any no votes on
So far.
Okay.
Looks like it's unanimous so far online.
Perfect. So here's our request to staff. First, this bill is a heavy lift, and the lift has just started, because over the next few months, every city in this state has work to do to comply with it. So we'll be with you every step of the way. We're actually trying to work on getting some technical assistance dollars available for cities to help over the time frame. We'll be putting together some templates to help walk you through it. So just know that if the bill passes, which I assume it will, there will be a lot of work over the next few months, because the Speaker of the House and I had a meeting, what day is today, Monday? So last Thursday, and it was just him and me in his office, where he referenced this bill, and he said, I think this bill is the most significant land use process bill of my career at the Capitol. Because he said, I want you to relay back to the league that I appreciate the fact that you guys brought ideas and worked in good faith. He said, I know there are things in there you don't like. There are things in there that developers don't like. But he said, I think this is the most meaningful land use process bill that I've been involved with up here. And so he wanted me to pass that along to this group. Again, there'll be a lot of work to do over the next few months. So Paul, I'm glad you brought up the implementation date, and we as staff will be putting together materials after the session. The other thing is, there are still a lot of legislators who are unclear about what the bill does and doesn't do. So if they reach out to you, explain to them that, yes, we voted to support this bill. It wasn't just we walked away from it. Like, we voted to support the bill and help them understand what it does and what it doesn't do. It is a meaningful bill. It is a heavy lift. It's going to take a lot of work on your end, but compared to what we're seeing in other states and kind of where the conversation started, as Tony pointed out, I hope we can hold our heads high on this one. Okay, the third bill in the third bill, there we go, House Bill 406. This is the third bill of the 3-bill housing package. Last week, we told you that there were some last-minute provisions added to the bill, and so we had recommended a position pending until those got resolved. You'll see it's stricken out in red because this morning, based in large part on our pushback about the integrity of the process that resulted in these 3 bills, there was an agreement to take these provisions out of House Bill 406 and insert them into another bill somewhere. Now, where that'll end up remains to be seen, and we've indicated that we still oppose those provisions. So we oppose them on the process side and the policy side. But there was also a recognition that these 3 bills that all came through the CHA, the Commission on Housing Affordability and Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, that we needed to be true to that process, and there's a recognition that those provisions should come out of that bill. So our recommendation here is to basically follow what we just did on SB 174, so long as the substitutes get adopted with that language out. So, Mayor Ramsey, I thought I saw that out of the corner of my eye.
Thank you. It feels monumental for me to even be making this motion because it is monumental because, as was stated with the previous bill, so much work has been done. I marvel that the last one was where we got it to. In fact, I took a picture of the screen. I'm like, I can't believe that we were successful in all of those ways from where it started in getting it to where it is. And I feel the same way about this. I move that we support House Bill 406, provided that the amended version, the substitute version that we're waiting to have approved, be approved. As long as the piece that we don't want in there for sure gets removed, which we are told it for sure will be, as long as it is. Then I move that we approve House Bill 406 with gratitude for the work that's been done on this that words can hardly express.
And still opposed to that provision. Okay, just making sure.
I see a second. Okay, motion and a second. Further discussion to that motion? Anything online? Okay, I guess we're good then. All in favor of supporting House Bill 406, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Online? Anybody opposed?
Okay.
Online, it looks like it's unanimous so far.
Okay, then I'll determine it's unanimous. Thank you.
Perfect. So let me sum, and then I'll turn it back over to Justin. I just want to thank everybody for your involvement in the league and for your participation in the legislative process. We have 4.5 business days to go, and things are going to move quick, and things are going to be fast and furious. So when you see an action alert, we need you to respond to it. When you see your nightly email, check on it so you can see where the different pieces are. Ultimately, we've made an argument all session about the credibility of the process of working through the CHA, working through the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, and that argument has carried weight up at the Capitol in a way that hasn't really happened before. So that speaks to the credibility of everybody in this room for your willingness to engage on tough issues. So there'll still be bills we oppose this final week and be ready to storm the castle on those. For the bills that we support, be ready to wave the flag in support on those. And thank you for your participation. I also, because I think this is my last time up here, and then it goes back to Justin, I just want to thank Justin and the entire legislative team for their phenomenal efforts, tracking a record number of bills, about 40% higher than last year. Let that set in for a second. 40% more bills that we were tracking this year than last year. So I just want to thank you guys, and well done. And so Justin, Molly, Carson, Liam, Todd, Gary, Roger, really the entire crew. Am I missing anybody? Deanne?
Cam.
Well, yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
I was gonna do this at the very end, but it's appropriate now, but this staff is fantastic. Working with the staff is amazing, and, you know, we had a tough day on Friday, and Friday night, I sent them all a text, and I said, I hope you all get some time with your friends, your friends or your families, and get some downtime over the weekend. Well, that did not happen. These guys were working all weekend for us, to make sure that we got some of the things like this, the strikeout on Representatives White bill and things like that, so they just don't rest. So I'm gonna thank you guys.
Thank you. I could not agree with that more. I also want to thank everybody. We have a lot of ancillary helpers who are not officially contracted to help the league, but who spend a lot of time in a lot of your cities, let a lot of your staff work on behalf of all of us. We have a lot of expertise. We have other organizations who are there, who champion. We've got Wasatch Front Regional Council here, but MAG works really closely with us, but we've got staff here from so many places, and you bring your professional expertise, and it's what's got us here. I still am marveling at what's happening right now, that we've been able to reach consensus on some of these things where we were fully going to get steamrolled. It's been a process for 9 months. Cam says a few months. It's 9 months since the UEOC meeting started for this session, and they'll start again in May. So thank you to all of you who have been part of this, all of you who have worked on it. Thank you to Mayor Silvestrini for his leadership, and again to the team. But this really is a big lift and a team effort, and thanks to all of you.
I feel like this is out of order because I'm going to be really boring and run back to talking about some bills really quickly. SB 199, we talked about this one a little bit earlier. Just a quick update. This one moved out of committee. It's into the Senate now. There's been discussion about this one moving from a 2/3 vote to perhaps a unanimous vote to make something non-referable. But we haven't seen any substitute language on that one. So this is one, keep up to date. We'll see where this one lands. Mining operation amendments, HB 527. We have not talked about this one a lot yet. It came out and it's going away quickly. The bill is still stuck in rules and has not been assigned to a committee. It's safe to say this bill is not going anywhere this session. So if you're concerned about 527, hold on to that concern. I'm not saying it's going away forever, but it's not going anywhere in the next couple of days. SB 271, this is a bill that we spoke about a little bit that came out last week in committee. We're watching to see where this one goes on the floor. Just in the interest of time, be on the lookout for potential alerts on this one. This is a bill that we are opposed to and have concerns with. And then finally, HB 173, which was government attorney fees amendments, has been substituted. It is now the HB 173 Citizen Empowerment Task Force. So it went from a bill that dealt with attorney fees and now is a task force that will look at attorney fees among some other things that is essentially allowing citizens access to the justice, judicial arena and to justice. ULCT has a seat on this task force. So if there's anybody who is really, really excited about talking about attorney fees throughout the entire summer, please let me know. With that, Mayor, I think we're ready to go to the bill tracker.
Almost. There are a couple things I want to talk about. So first of all, another bill that died in rules is a bill that would have taken away eminent domain authority for municipalities to use that for park space, which is so critical when we are dealing with putting more density in places, and need to have the open space that's associated with that. And then I guess the one thing I want to talk about with respect to the fifth quarter or whatever it is, you know, we had staff and I have worked at using the basically reforming this, extending the sunset on the ability for counties to enact this sales tax, but also giving a portion of it to cities, which we then offered up actually as an additional remedy for the development community if cities weren't complying with their moderate income housing plans. Now, that was offered up to them, but the way that the bill is fashioned, that's not part of it right now. But this is a new revenue source for cities. It's important for cities. There is going to have to be some reconciliation between the two bills that are vying for this. But I would actually urge you to support this, and we'll work on trying to figure out some of the bugs that some of you have mentioned to us with respect to this. But It's actually a good bill because it does give cities additional money for transportation.
Bill tracker.
So, I guess the bill tracker's up there, the positions are announced. Can I, unless anybody has any concerns about any of those, I'll entertain a motion to approve the positions in the bill tracker.
One quick question. I think SB 84, we were shown as neutral on that bill. Given what they did with that bill to Summit County over the last week, I'm wondering if we can take a position to oppose. It's probably academic because it's passed both bodies now, but it's a complete preemption of local land use authority on the part of Summit County.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second to change the position on, what was that, 84? To opposed. Discussion of that motion beyond that. Andrew.
Yes. Please say it, Andrew.
Sorry, I'm Andrew Gruber from the Wasatch Front Regional Council. The underlying bill in SB 84 is about housing and transit reinvestment zones. It was a technical modifications, and it was broadly supported. There was a substitute that added the Summit County provision, so I would respectfully offer that if the motion recognize that the regular HTRZ provisions are supported, and the objection is specifically to that one provision that was added in the sub.
Okay, the maker of the motion is signaling to me that we can amend the motion, or he'll amend the motion to support the HTRZ amendments, but just object to the provisions related to Summit County. There's a second, I don't know who seconded it. You supported that as well? Okay, so we have an amended motion to just basically indicate opposition to the Summit County specific provisions in 84 and to otherwise support the bill. Discussion. All right, all in favor of that motion? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that we held separately, so I think I still need a motion to otherwise authorize the positions in the bill tracker.
Well, we have, before the motion, we have that back there.
What, you withdrew your motion to approve? Okay, I'll make one quick, there are several of these. The reason they're positioning pending is either there are one or two of them that we are still actively negotiating on some things on, and where those land will depend a great deal on where those positions land. And the rest of them just mean the bill is not going anywhere, so we didn't think it mattered if we took a position on them. So if you're wondering why those position pendings are still there on several of those bills. We do not have a position of dead, but yeah.
Councilmember for Kaysville. I would like to see us move a position of favorable for House Bill 532. That's the adoption of a current state building code. That went through House on Friday and was sent to the Senate committee, but it does not have a time or date for the hearing. It is a floor sponsor of Senator Bramble. It is less hearing from you or whatever, and we have a favorable position to that.
We are already supporting that.
We are.
Yep, it is support on there, yep.
I just want to make sure, because right now we have a 2015 International Residential Code and 2018 Commercial Code. We'd like to get that updated to
Yes.
the 2021 codes for both residential and commercial in your city, so that all that new construction you're seeing coming into your city is under a current code, and we're a little behind, so we'd like to see this one get through. So,
Okay, thank you. So our current position is to support that bill. So I'm.
Motion to approve the list.
So I have a motion from Kate Bradshaw to approve the bill tracker list, and a second by Mayor Walker. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and we need one more motion here, but I also want to thank everybody who has participated at LPC this session. Thanks for your guidance and your input, and helping to make our state a better place. So motion to adjourn. We are adjourned, thank you.